Hey yo, what is up? This is NinjaGeek, and in episode 6 we're not going to unbox one game but two. You may be familiar with this, Too Many Bones, Undertow. Now, I picked this up at UK Games Expo last year and it actually turned out to be one of my favourite games of 2019. For those that are unfamiliar with the game, it's got everything from adventure, dice rolling, item collection, co-op play, dice rolling again, battles, upgrading your characters, more dice rolling. Now, I'm not going to unbox Undertow because it's already opened, already played, and it's good. Those that don't know, Undertow is actually a standalone expansion to the dice builder RPG Too Many Bones. Now, where that base game is 1 to 4 players, Undertow is initially designed for up to 2 players, but does introduce some new mechanics, such as the mech enemies, which are resistant or immune to bleed and poison effects, for example, and the Krellin, which are aquatic beasts of various types. Undertow also has a double-sided battle mat, so the Gearlocs can fight on the ground or on this raft that they're travelling down the river on. As mentioned, this can be used as a standalone game for up to 2 players, as I currently use it, or can be added to the base game as an expansion. However, if you have Undertow only and you want to add some variety to your games or to increase the player count for up to 4 players, you can introduce these guys. Cha-ching! These are additional Gearlocs that I can use instead of Stanza and Duster found in Undertow. Or if I can make 3 more friends, we can each take a Gearloc and have a party. So who are they? Firstly, here we have Nugget the Treasure Hunter. She has skills that introduce boons that last the entire battle, as well as a unique way to gain some of the best loot in the game. From the artwork here, I can only assume that she has melee and ranged attack abilities, which is welcome. Next up, we have Gilly the Scoutmaster. I assume he's called Gilly because he's wearing some form of camo gear. It appears that Gilly, he can lay traps and has intel, so I'm sure that they can look at the enemy chips at some point during the game. Gilly can also call on friendly support from friendly animals and beasts, and as they have a bow, I'm assuming they have ranged attack abilities. Now, one last thing before we take a look inside these Gearloc boxes is that Chip Theory Games do provide some excellent tutorial videos for how to use the Gearlocs. They are very comprehensive and I thoroughly recommend anybody playing the game to look at those before you start playing. So now we're going to take a look inside these. Okay, the first Gearloc we're going to look at is Nugget the Treasure Hunter. Let's see what she has to offer. Now, the first thing you'll notice with these Gearlocs is there's not much content in the box. However, the gameplay value is huge. Firstly, we have the dice box with all the die and the Gearloc chip, and she has a set of purple dice. You'll then have the Gearloc playmat, which is really, really nice. And also is a double-sided reference card that highlights all the skills and ability for those dice and the Gearloc itself. Now, the innate and innate plus 1 ability are as follows. So she starts the game with Treasure Seeker, and whenever Nugget draws a loot as an encounter reward, she gets to draw an extra 1 and discard 1. When she upgrades, due to the backup plan, she becomes Treasure Hunter, and whenever she draws loot as part of an encounter reward, she draws an extra loot as before, but gets to keep both, which is pretty awesome. So for the backup plan, 1 is collect stones, which is to do with a slingstone consumable down here. 2 bones is revitalize, where she can gain 2 hit points. 3 bones is not used. Disable, you can add a disable effect die to any adjacent 5-point or less baddie. And coup de grace, that means that basically she can jump to the top of the initiative meter on the battle map. Now with her skill tree and die, we'll look at the gifted line first. And here we have Wildborn, and you can roll this die if there are more baddies on the battle mat than there are Gearlocs, and in which case, if you show a particular number, any baddie equaling those points or less is removed from the battle mat and placed to the bottom of the battle queue. We have Lucky, and before battle you can choose one of the 4 sides. You have +1 defense, +1 bones, +1 hit points, and +1 damage. And if you ever roll a at all during Nugget's turn and you roll no bones, you can actually claim what's on here because it remains active for the whole battle and in the active slot. And lastly, Golden Touch. If rolled and it shows this symbol, place in your lock slot and you can claim that during the training. For the Keymaster, we have Combat Proficiency. We have Locksmith down here and Keen Eye. Now for Combat Proficiency, this gives you +1 to these areas here whilst active. Keen Eye shows a treasure trove map or a treasure chest. If you show the treasure trove map, you get to shuffle a special encounter into the encounter deck. Whereas if you roll the chest icon, you get to draw 3 loot cards and keep 1. With regard to the locksmith, there are 2 sides with either die or this one with the with either with chests or the chest with the cogs. If you roll a chest with a number, this is a minor lockpick, and you can add that number to an action die during a lockpick attempt. And if you roll the icon shown here, which is the chest and the cogs, you actually get to bypass a lock without using any action die at all. Next is the propellant. We have Longblade, and this is pretty good because this does damage to an enemy of various sorts. I think it's just 1 and 2 on these die, but you get to put that die back into the player mat as well. He doesn't get exhausted. Nugget's Dagger adds bleed to an enemy, and I like this one. This is Tinkered Bolo, which can reduce movement, defense value or attack value of the enemy that you've used that on. I guess it ties them up and makes them less proficient. Lastly, we have Sword Dancer, where we have Dash, which adds greater movement to your Gearloc. Tumble, which allows you to jump up to 7 places on the initiative meter on the battle map. There is Sidestep, and Sidestep, if there are any effect or damage from a baddie to your Gearloc, you can actually avoid all of that. And the last one is Deja Vu, which means that she can actually take another turn immediately after her last turn. Now, with regards to the consumables, you have the slingstones here, which are 0. When you collect stones from your backup plan, you can increase that by 1 each time. If you ever gain a fortunate discovery, you can bump that up to 5. Now, when using this, you can roll a number of attack dice against a non-adjacent enemy, so it's a ranged attack, and the number of die you used, you actually reduce this number value because you're using your stones to attack that enemy. I like this one as well. This is the Gem Decoy, so this has all the baddie points on there, and when rolled, you place adjacent to that baddie, and what happens then is the baddie will then move towards that shiny gem rather than your Gearloc. And lastly, number 4 is Scramble or Scrambler. And what this does is you place in your lock slot when you've acquired it, and you use this during a lockpick attempt where it counts as a second intuition die throughout the whole attempt. Now with her initiative die, it starts at 2. There are 2 3s and goes up to 5. Obviously, we've all seen these before on all the Gearlocs, so they remain the same, and has double-sided chip. So that is Nugget, and what we'll do now is have a look at Gilly. This is Gilly, the Scoutmaster, and in here we have some really nice camo green die which represent Gilly quite well, I think. And under here again we will have the Gilly Gearloc player mat, which is really nice, plus a double-sided reference sheet for all the skills and abilities for him. So with the innate and innate +1 abilities, they start the game with Scout. Before battle, they can reveal a baddie in any active stack, and Gilly may recycle that back into the bottom of the stack. Once upgraded, they become Scoutmaster, and they can do the same but do it with 2 baddies. For the backup plan, we have switch targets, where after before applying dice, you can actually switch the initial target for that particular roll. Split target here allows you to change target, but as long as one die has been applied to the initial target, you can then use the rest of the die to a different target. Fortunate Discovery allows you to claim one of these. Lure Away allows you to remove a 5-point or less baddie from the battle mat and place to the bottom of the battle queue. And Broadhead lets you deal 5 damage to a target, which is really, really nice. Now, for the skill tree, we have Trapper, and first one we have is Rusted Spikes, Woven Snare, and Hidden Rut. Now, with the traps, these are quite unique and function differently than most skills, as they're placed on the battle mat before the start of battle and don't cost a dex roll to use. You can place multiple die on a particular position, and the traps are not triggered until a unit is actually on that position. If triggered during the battle setup, you place all the baddies and then you trigger the die. And to trigger the traps, you roll the die and then consult the dice icon key. For Rusted Spikes, this will give you a number with a bear trap icon. And this does true damage, and you get to then shift that enemy one lane, which can then trigger other traps. The next one, Woven Snare, is a net, and it shows a minus attack modifier on there. And that unit or baddie has its attack reduced by that number for the entire battle. And lastly, Rut. If a baddie of equal or less value triggers this trap, they cannot move any further that turn. So next is the Rangers, and we have Multi-Arrow, Brute Buster, and Marked Enemy. So for Multi-Arrow, a number of your rolled attack dice can also hit a second baddie of your choice, which is really nice. For the Displace, you can see there's sort of like directional arrows on here. You can move any one baddie one position in the direction of the arrow on that die. And that'd be good for shifting baddies across to try and trigger additional traps. And the Marked Enemy, this does ×2 damage to the next time that baddie is attacked. And that includes even if one of your companions or allies actually attacks that baddie as well. Next we have Marksman. So we have In the Zone, Return Fire, and Piercing Arrow. Piercing Arrow here actually does deals the number of damage to the target's active defense, and this arrow also suspends Thick Skin for this turn. The Return Fire is pretty nice. After a non-adjacent baddie attacks you, you can roll that number of attack dice in return. This lasts the entire battle. However, if you roll any bones during here, you don't place them in your backup plan. And In the Zone, this is really good. If you decide to roll it, you get +1 damage to your attack. See, I've rolled a 4. What I have to do then is push my luck. I can roll the dice again, hoping that I get equal to or less than 4. So again, add 1 damage. If I ever exceed that number that I've previously rolled, I actually fail, and all damage earned from that die is lost. Lastly, we come to the pets. We have Call the Falcon, Call the Tiger, and Call the Wolverine. And lastly here is Command. Now, with pets, if learned, Gilly can roll his pet dice during his turn. It does cost 1 dex to do this in an attempt to call them. There are bones on some of these, so some of these are a bit ignorant and don't listen. Each pet die indicates the number of hit points it has, and also indicates if it requires a dex to stay on during the next turn. If you don't use the dex for that particular pet, then the pet is exhausted. They're considered companions, so that they can be targeted by baddies, and they all use a melee attack form. Each of the pets take their turn immediately before Gilly, and what they can do is they can move up to 2 position and then deal attack damage equal to what's shown on here. This is actually the damage, not the number of dice they do, so they automatically do damage. Each pet also has a skill that makes them unique. So this here command, you roll the dice and it will show you, actually, is this the right one?
No, sorry, that's command. There you go. So you roll this command dice here, and it show a symbol such as bleed or pounce or frenzy, for example. And then on this is a small icon to show which of these pets it can be used for. So, for instance, if you roll this one here, which is dive bomb, it can only be used by Call the Falcon. And what this does is it gives 3 damage to an adjacent unit when you place that falcon on any position on the battle map. Sacrifice is a nice one as well, which can be used by all of them. And what happens in Sacrifice is that you place a stun effect on the adjacent baddie, but the pet dies or is exhausted anyway. Lastly, with the consumables, we have extra mech leg, which is just a consumable die for increasing the number of bones. There is camo, and what camo does is you can increase or decrease the battle point value for the battle queue. So you can increase the points when you're initially creating that queue. And lastly, we have bait, and what bait does is it allows you, there's a particular set of numbers on here, so 2 or 1, and you can re-roll any of these dice that many times. With the initiative, it starts at 3, goes up to 6, and there are 2 5s, so generally speaking, quite high initiative. Yeah, so that's it for Gilly. So now I'll give you my overall thoughts on those.
There we go. I hope you enjoyed the unboxing of the 2 Gearlocs from Too Many Bones. We saw Nugget, who is able to use these ranged attacks using slingstones from her consumable supply, as well as being able to use skills from this gifted skill tree, where she can activate these boons to provide abilities and bonuses that last the entire battle. She's also the keymaster, so she is able to gain lots and lots of loot quite quickly. It has abilities to enable her to bypass certain areas of the lockpicking round, which is really, really useful. As for Gilly, they're able to lay traps, and if you are careful and think about it, you can place them so that the enemies can trigger one after the other by being displaced into different positions around the battle mat. Gilly also able to call on animals such as the falcon, tiger and wolverine, use these in battle before his play, and if you have the command die, you're able to then roll that and hopefully gain a special ability for that animal and beast during Gilly's turn as well. Now I hope that unboxing was comprehensive enough for you to decide if you want those 2 Gearlocs, or if you're going to look at other ones that are available at Chip Theory Games. If you decide to get them, you then have a choice of either replacing the Gearlocs in your game, or if you have the Undertow game instead, you can just increase your player count, which is always going to be good as well. Anyway, thanks for watching NinjaGeek Unboxes, and if you do like the content, please subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.